Hello, hello, hello. You are live. Okay, welcome everyone to our Monday night live broadcast about Moshiach and Geula. I'm going to dedicate tonight's learning to the full Hisgavus of Melech HaMashiach. As we see, the world is rapidly falling into despair. More than ever, we need redemption. We need to learn about redemption. We need to understand redemption. And most importantly, as the Rebbe says, we need to live redemption. And the best way to live redemption, the Rebbe says, is to learn about redemption, which is why we get together every Monday night from 8 to 10 o'clock to learn about redemption, according to the teachings of the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach himself. Let's get cracking. So we are now in Parshas Lech Lecha, my favorite parsha of the Torah. Has a lot of deep significance and meaning for me personally, but we could say that for another day, for bringing some time. For now, let's see what the Rebbe has to say about Lech Lecha. Okay. Excuse me. The sikh was originally given on Shabbos Parshas Lech Lecha Yud Aleph Mar Cheshbon Tovshin Nun Beis. So we're coming up on 30 years. Alaikum Shalom. How are you, Dov? 30 years since it was first given. Okay, let's get cracking. Aleph. Parshas Lech Lecha Hi Parshas Klalis Ve'ikris. This week's Parshas Lech Lecha is a general and a main parsha. In other words, it's a very important parsha of the Torah. Parsha Zu Metchila Tkufasayu Shal Avraham Avinu. Because this parsha begins the period of the life of Avraham Avinu. Yehudi Rishon, who we know is the first Yid, the first Jew. Rashisa Mitzivu Harishon Shal Kodesh Baruch Hu Avraham. V'Yomar Hashem Al Avraham. Lech Lecha Ma'artzecha U'Mimolodecha U'Bebeis Avicha El Al Ha'art Asher Arecha. A very powerful statement that we will delve into with God's help this evening, which is briefly for the Pshat. Basically, Hashem says to Abraham, Lech Lecha. So first of all, Lech Lecha, in Hebrew, the prefix Lamed means both to and for. So Lech Lecha means go to you and for you. Go for you and to you, same thing. Meaning that the traveling, the true path, the true journey that each one of us must take to uncover the true essence of who we are is a journey inside. It's not a journey to buying new cars and new houses and traveling around the world. Those are all wonderful things. But the true journey to find your true identity and your true purpose in the world means to go within. The deeper within you go, the more you find yourself, the more you find God, and the more you find the true essence of who you are and why you're here. And who is it for? Ultimately, it's for your own good. Because after all, we all want to know who we are, why we're here, what our purpose is. So Hashem says to Avram, go to you for you, ma'artzecha, from your land, mimolodesecha, from your birthplace, u'mebeis avicha, and from your father's home, to the land that I will show you. In other words, asher arecha, I will show it to you. Meaning, in order to take this journey, you have to trust God. No one gives you the destination at the beginning. In fact, the journey itself is the destination. But God is saying, trust me. Go where I'm telling you to go. And you will find, I will show you wonders beyond your wildest dreams. But you have to trust me. You have to trust God. And after this he says, and afterwards we see in the continuation of the Parsha that Abraham journeyed to Eretz Yisrael. And we see that the expression of Hashem to give Abraham and to his offspring to Eretz Israel. And he said, to your offspring, I will give this land. Lecha itnena v'zorecha ad olam. And I will give it to you and your offspring forever, for eternity. It is not a gift that God is taking back. In other words, the land of Israel always has belonged to the Jews and will always belong to the Jewish people for eternity. The bris bein habasari, and therefore they made a covenant amongst the parts, which in the Sefer Yetzirah explains in detail the different animals and different parts that were divided, the covenant that God gave to Abraham. V'yomahu karas Hashem es Abraham b'ris lamar l'zarecha nisati es haaretz hazos. And he basically said, today, this day, Hashem said to Abraham, I am making a covenant amongst you and your offspring to give you this land forever. By the way, just on a side note, the Arizal explains that the journey of Lech Lecha to Eretz Israel was a journey from Mochin Katnut to Mochin Gadlut. In other words, a journey from restricted consciousness to a journey to expanded consciousness. Simplifying, basically meaning to go out of a state where your emotions control you. When things don't go your way, you get easily angered, frustrated, upset, worried. These are all emotional attributes because your emotions have taken control of your brain. The land of Israel is represented Mochin Gadlut, or expansive consciousness, where you enter into what is known as Chabad, or Chokmah, Bina, and Das consciousness, where you have the ability and capacity to use your brain to overcome your emotions. That means regardless of whatever situation you're in, you have the ability to stay calm, to stay cool, to stay collected, to know that God has put you in whatever situation you are, and that everything is for the best and God is running the world, and to allow your godly energy of your brain to not only not be subservient to your emotions, but to control your emotions. The reason that most people get frustrated, worried, anxious, whatever the case may be, is because they are under the rulership of their emotions. Somehow they feel that their emotions define them. So if they're angry, they say, I'm an angry person. If they're sad, they say, I'm a sad person. They're using their emotions to describe who they are, which is the furthest thing from the truth, because the reason why our head is above our hearts is because our ability to think and rationalize and use our logical brain is far superior to emotions. But unfortunately, after the first sin of Adam and Chava, our emotions went wild. And basically, as they say, the loonies took control of the asylum and started controlling over us. Anyways, just another point. Let's continue. The Sima Parsha, up into the completion of the Parsha, Bob Supar, mitzvahs Mila, when we learn about the mitzvah of bris Mila. And that's what I like to say to the what do they call them? The black Hebrews who think they're the real Jews. Bring it on. I've got plenty of moilim who are willing to sit with you guys and introduce you into the covenant. Okay. That the fulfillment of the mitzvah of circumcision through Avraham Avinu, Asher ba'amet sosai nikrasas bebris bein Yisrael ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This was a covenant and a commandment that was given to Abraham, which basically is a covenant and commandment for all times between the Yidden and Hashem. Zois brisi, this covenant, beini uvanechem, bein zerecha acharecha. This is a covenant for your children and their children, and all your seed and offspring for eternity. Brisi v'asrechem, the bris olam. It is a covenant in the flesh. Literally. Between God and the Yidden forever. The Kevan Shirnim Elo, Shabaparsha Lech Lecha, Ma'artzecha, B'Techa, Sokodesh Baruch Hu, Eretz Yisrael, Mitzvahs Mila, Heminim Harishonim, Bavodas Shel Avraham Avinu. That the whole concept of Lech Lecha, and then also the subsequent bris, this is the beginning of the service of Avraham Avinu as the first Jew, Yehudi Rishon. Shemimen Makoy Shal Am Yisrael Kulo. Muvan Mikach Shebehem בו לידי ביטוי תוכנם הכללי של כלליס התורה ושל יהודס בכלל. And this, in fact, was a general expression of the concept of the Torah that will ultimately be given between the Jews and Hashem. Hold on, I just want to get a mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2, mic check, 1, 2. So 13, I got 15, that's 8, 94. Okay, good. Base, you do it. אם אברהם אבינו החלה התקופה של שני אלופים בתורה, אברהם פסח והקרנויס, יקרס מן תורה. יסר מכך, הכל ממנו התחיל במן תורה. As we know that Abraham began the second period of creation. We know that that God created the world in 6 days, corresponding to 1 day in heaven is equal to 1,000 years on earth. And therefore, the 6,000 years of creation as we know it are divided into three distinct periods. The first 2,000 years are called chaos, meaning the world was in a state of chaos. Excuse me, because the Torah had not been given. The second 2,000 years are like connected to the Torah. That's when the Torah is given, and that's when the Torah is spread out to the world. And the last period, the last 2,000 years, are connected to redemption, Geula. So Abraham's birth is what began the second Tkufa, the second period of creation. And therefore, we know the concept of Lech Lecha is directly connected to the beginning and preparation for the Yidden to receive the Torah. Okay, we have to understand. First of all, the Torah comes from the lashon, the root of hora'ah, which means to teach or to learn, if you will. And therefore, the Torah is an eternal guidebook for the Jewish people in all times, at all places. In other words, this is not a history book. Sure, it recounts our history, but the Torah is a living, breathing reality of which every single year and every single day, regardless of where we are and what situation we are and what place we're in, we have to live with the Parsha, as the Frierdiker Rebbe said. Meaning we have to live with the times. We have to live in accordance with the Parsha, what's going on, and realize that our divine service of Hashem is relived every single time we read the Parsha, regardless of where we are. So the Rebbe asked a very simple but profound question. If Lech Lecha, as we said a second ago, is the preface and the beginning of the Jewish people getting the Torah, so now that we're a few thousand years after getting the Torah, how does Lech Lecha apply to us? We already have the Torah. If the whole concept of Lech Lecha is a preparation to receive the Torah, but we already have the Torah, so how is it applicable to us now? Because there has to be a lesson for us at this time and place. And we know that since the giving of the Torah was a one-time event, and since we said already that Lech Lecha was the beginning of the service of Avraham Avinu as a preparation to give him the power to prepare for receiving the Torah. So what's the dealio with us now? We already received the Torah. The Torah is a one-time event. It's done. Over 3,000 years ago. How is it applicable to us here now? Okay, and so this question is even strengthened further B'kol shana ma medek b'kres parsha b'Torah. It's a good tea. Yesh l'hiyos ema mechadesh. B'kol yom yehiu ba'enecha chadashim. ולחץ כמה וכמה שחפו בזמן ומיכל בשנה שבו בקרים עשר פרשת כולה בתורה וברבי בתוספס ברכס לפני ולאחרי. It's all brackets. כיוון שעה ביום מסעוררים העניינים המדוברים בפרשה בדוגמה התרחשו שם בפעם הראשונה. על רבה, והספר אפילו ביועסר, שאז ביועסר. Okay, so every single year that when for sure we're reading the parsha of the Torah, it says we must live as if we're getting the Torah right now, as we said before. And we know that the bracha we say when we go up to the Torah, when we're called to the Torah, where the Torah is taken out 3 days a week in shul, is not saying the Torah. I'm giving you the Torah today. I'm giving you your blessing on the Torah today. So we have to ask ourselves, what is this additional power, this additional strength that we keep getting of Lech Lecha, that every time we learn this week's parsha, we go up to the Torah, and we have to say that it's brand new. This week, Lech Lecha has an energy that has never had before. It's higher energy than it was first given, because every year, everything elevates, gets closer to Hashem, closer to the redemption. But what is, again, so it even strengthens the question, so we're getting further away from the Torah, but this parsha is supposed to be more and more applicable to us, even though the Torah is every single year further and further away from when we first received it. And if the whole point of Lech Lecha is to prepare for the Torah, well, it seems we're just getting further away from that. So what's the deal? Al pi zeh nimtza midei shana b'Shabbos parshat Lech Lecha shebo shev nis'ora ve'inin shel Lech Lecha hakana v'techil l'man Torah v'haitzveh l'gabi kol ha'shanim shlefnei zeh v'drush habir. Okay. Mahi mashma'ot hadavar eleinu atah. We just said a second. So what is it that we can learn out from this after the giving of the Torah? Not only are we no longer preparing to receive the Torah like Avraham Avinu did in his Lech Lecha, but we already got the Torah completely. We're way past it. Thousands of years ago. And even more than this, the concept of keeping the Torah and fulfilling it is applicable to us every single day. Notain the Torah. Lashon haveh, I'm giving you the Torah in today's present tense. And as our rabbis teach us, the Torah shall be brand new in your eyes, as if you first got it. Hayasam Nitzilo Hazukar the Ayo Ma'alin the Kodesh Muvan Shabakal Yom Sarich Hachidush. The Yois Bedargani Ilis Yoiser, Nikafish Haya Kodim Lacha. Im came the Africa Herlias, Hayoim Yoimas by any Shaman Torah, with Nights of Lacha, or even Muhad with Deshana Beshana. Elias Achar Elias Behemshach Rebekah Gadol Shel Yamim Shanim V'Doires Mahu Efa Initial Lech Lecha Kananamato. I was just emphasizing the point we just brought out, which is that every single time we go to the Torah, we are getting the Torah brand new. Every year, everything's getting elevated higher and higher and higher. So every Parshas Lech Lecha is going higher and higher and higher in levels. And if the whole purpose of Lech Lecha is to get us closer and closer to receiving the Torah, We've gotten the Torah thousands of years ago, and we're going further and further away. Even every year, it's more time since we've gotten the Torah. So once again, how is Parshas Lech Lecha a preparation for receiving the Torah? Excuse me, for us after we've already gotten it? And it's not possible to say. Therefore, it's not possible to say that the service of Lech Lecha is for the purpose of preparing for the Torah. משום שגילויים פועלסם של עשרת הדיברות במתן תורה לא היה תלוי בדרגת עבודה של בני ישראל. הגילוי של מתן תורה מצד עצמו פועל בכל העולם כולו. So the Rebbe says, hold on a second. That the revealing that took place and the Esra Dibros, the 10 sayings, and ultimately the 10 commandments of giving of the Torah were not dependent on any connection to the level of the service of the Jewish people. In other words, God's giving of the Torah was not like, oh, the Jewish people are prepared for it because of Abraham's Lech Lecha. Therefore, I'm going to give them a higher level of the Torah. It had no bearing whatsoever. The Torah was a gift from above. We agreed to accept it, but our work up until that point in time had no bearing on the degree or the level of the Torah that we were receiving. Because the revelations that took place on Torah, on Har Sinai, and the giving of the Torah themselves, were for the entire world equal. And how much more so the Yid? So much so that every word, at least the first two words that came out of God's mouth, our souls flew out of our bodies. דבר העמיד על כך שהגיעו על לשלימוס עבודת כנשמה בגוף. But immediately, Moshe had to take over, because we know the entire service is souls and bodies. So, again, we're trying to figure out what exactly is this concept of Lech Lecha? How is it preparation for receiving the Torah? And how it is applicable to us in our times. Okay, Gimel. So one point to comprehend this. That the obligation to fulfill the Torah exists in every single day and every single year. But even higher, as we said earlier. It's a concept in Judaism that God is constantly, God's infinite, but he keeps lifting the world up higher and higher and higher. It's infinite, so it goes on forever. Meaning, the higher it goes, the more godliness gets revealed in the world, even if it's in a state of temporary concealment, if you will. Nevertheless, the divine energy is still entering into the world. And the Rebbe said the only reason that we still see evil and so much of it is because that energy has still not entered into the vessels properly. Which the Rebbe said the way to do that is to learn about Moshiach and Geula. So if anyone has any ideas on how we can encourage other people to do what the Rebbe said and prepare for Mashiach, I'd be happy to hear them. But in the meantime, what's happening is there's a tremendous divine energy in the world, and it's not going proper into the vessels. It's Parshas Tazria Metzora, Nun Aleph. But the fact that you see so much bad, so much corruption, so much garbage going on in the world is a sign, not of corruption and garbage, but a sign that there's a tremendous amount of divine energy going into the world. And what happens when all that energy comes into the world and does not place properly in the vessels of the divine receptacles to grasp it, you have what is this concept of yanika, of the klipa, of the forces of impurity, suck from that divine energy and use that power for the opposite of good. So the idea is that more and more energy comes into the world every single year, And every single day, because we're getting closer and closer to the redemption, more godly light is coming into the world. And therefore, we're elevating higher and higher and higher and higher. The Chadash to the point that every time we learn Torah, it has to be what our sages say is brand new in our eyes. And not only that, it has to be at a higher level. I don't mean to get stoned before you learn. I mean, we have to have a deeper state of consciousness. We have to realize that it's more godly energy, more godly light that's coming in than has ever been before. So the Rebbe says now, it's in the brackets. Usually I skip it, but I want to read this bracket right here. So it says the concept of Lech Lecha as a preparation for Matan Torah. In order to do Lech Lecha, in order to properly go out of where you are, the Rebbe says, where you're holding, again, there's multiple levels of depth, but to simplify things, a lot of these journeys, a lot of these stories, if you will, even though they're true in the Torah, are all different stages of consciousness. The idea is to go out of self-consciousness and enter into godly consciousness. And all the journeys, all the travels, all the wars, all that stuff that's going on are metaphors for what we're experiencing inside of us. Obviously, they're true, they happen, but on a personal level, the idea is to go away from our what is known as yeshus, our sense of self. The more we feel ourselves, the further we are from God. The more we feel God, the further we get away from ourselves, which is the goal. So the Rebbe says, in order to reach higher levels of consciousness, you have to go in a way of what is called halicha amitis, which is truly going, right? In other words, like really go out of your capacity. Very few of us do this. We do it maybe with when we started tshuva. Most Baal tshuvas in the beginning do real lech lecha. That's why I'm not sure, but I'd be willing to bet that, like me, this is one of your favorite parshas because it's a story of our life. We did lech lecha. That's like real lech lecha. Like, okay, we're living this reality. We know what we are doing. And next thing you know, we're like completely in a different reality. We're not touching our beard. We're covering our head. We're wearing tzitzis. We're keeping kosher. We're keeping Shabbat. We're doing all, I mean, it was like, wow, that's real lech lecha. But the Rebbe says we have to do that not once in a lifetime. Obviously, it's going to be challenging to make a jump at the same level that we did when we first started our tshuva. But what happens with a lot of Baal tshuvas, and what happens with most from people, is we have that boost, we have that jump, we have that inspiration, and then we go to a point, and then we start tapering off. Because whatever, we don't feel that godly energy anymore. We don't feel that razzmatazz. I don't know the word I'm looking for, like that, like wow, that amazing feeling. You know, it's. Remember when you put on tefillin in the beginning? It was like Baruch. I was like, wow. Now you put on tefillin, okay? You know, it's like, I don't know how many times you wake up and put on your jacket, like, oh, shot is free, baby. That feels so good. I wish, right? We're going through. We're doing our best. The Rebbe said, no, we got to dig down. We got to jump. We got to go out of our comfort zones. We got to keep challenging ourselves to really, truly go. The Rebbe says, to a place that's not compared at all to where you were before. That's real lech lecha, right? It's like someone saying, I'm moving out of my parents' house. I'm ready to be independent, and then move next door. Okay, you moved. It's a step, but it's not like I'm moving across the country. It's a baby step. The Rebbe says true lech lecha can't be baby steps. That has to be leaps. Yep. That damn schmutz always gets in the way. Okay. Let's go a little bit deeper. Excuse me. The reason that it's necessary to do this continuously after even reading the Torah, that we have to keep doing Lech Lecha even way after we got the Torah, is not only in order that we should be prepared to reach higher levels by getting the Torah. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. But the idea of Lech Lecha is connected to the essence, the true essence of completion of Matan Torah. In other words, getting the Torah is a one-time event. But like anything in life, there's levels, right? Someone makes a jump from amateur to pro, right? That's a big leap. They were an amateur, now they're pro. Okay, now you're playing with the pros, you're in the big dogs. Now you got to go higher and higher and higher, right? You got to compete in the higher levels. So we didn't have a Torah, now we have a Torah, but we got to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper into the Torah. And deeper into ourselves. Of course, the Yetzer Hara are always looking for new ways. That's a Yetzer Hara's job. You know, I read a letter. I don't want to digress too much, but we can digress from time to time to forbid a little. I read a letter from the Rebbe the other day about someone who's complaining about their shalom bias. Basically said to the Rebbe they want a bracha for divorce, that home is hell, for lack of a better term. Constantly fighting with his wife, things not working out, thinks it's time for a divorce. So the Rebbe wrote back, there must be Nisim. It will take one just to get all Jews to agree who Moshiach is, and that is to say nothing of the trials you must go through. So, yeah, first of all Jews don't need to agree on who Moshiach is. That's not a prerequisite that everyone agrees. It says at the end of Megillat Esther, and most of the people respected Mordechai. Not all of them. We're never getting everyone. After Mashiach is revealed, when the Beis Hamikdash, there won't be a question. But anyways, there is a lot of trials and tribulations, that's for sure. Not just regarding Mashiach's identity, but on everything we're going through right now. That's for sure. I mean, it was basically yesterday's time. It says that in the final days, in the end of days right before Mashiach, literally yesterday's time, the Alter Rebbe said that all the Jewish people will be put to a test. And many will fail. Many will not pass that test. They will not make it. It says those who study the Zohar and eat from the tree of life will, in fact, not be tested, because those who study the Zohar and study Pnimius Torah, Chassidus, are connected to a godly energy and a godly level that is much, much deeper, if you will, and they see every single thing that is happening and realize that it's Hashem behind it. It's Hashem's concealment. That was last week's parsha where the Rebbe said over and over again, just like in Yom Kippur, Hashem hu Elokim, Havaya hu Elokim, to remind us that we're entering into a stage of massive concealment, of massive hiding over of God, more than it's ever been. And regardless of what you see in the nature and the world around you, Havaya is Elokim, that it is God. Nothing is happening in this world without God allowing it to happen. What about the prophets who say every knee would be and all will recognize God's Mashiach? Sure seems there will be no disagreement. I don't. You would have to give me a specific quote and what specific prophet you're referring to, and then we could look at that in context. It's hard to say in general. What about all the prophets who say every knee would be and all will recognize God's Mashiach? Yeah, when he's revealed, for sure, it's going to be obvious. But I'm saying leading up to it, we don't need a general consensus of everyone to be who it is. Obviously, when Mashiach is revealed, it won't be a question. Okay, let's continue on. I already did that. Okay, Dalit. Yuvan b'hakdim mispar sha'alo yis'ah hamusupar dor parshasinu eidos halichasei sha'avram Yisrael avyam rikanasa le'eretz Yisrael. And since we see the prior to the story in this week's parsha of Avram traveling to and entering the land of Israel. And that is where Hashem basically made the promise to Avram that I'm going to give this land to you and to all of your offspring for eternity. כיוון שעניין המוחד זכר בפרשתנו בדבר הליכס וכנסס אברהם לארץ ישראל וניתנה לו זרע שב וחזר והספר מדי שנה כאשר קוראים את פרשת השאלה. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost track of I started a thought and I jumped over it. I just want to finish the thought before we go on. Anyway, so someone wrote to the Rebbe about their challenges with Shalom Bayis, and he wanted a bracha to get a divorce, and the Rebbe told him no, and the Rebbe said something very interesting points, that every single one of our souls are Gilgulim, we're reincarnations of previous souls. A soul needs to reincarnate numerous times and come back into different bodies until that soul completes all the mitzvahs that are incumbent upon that soul in its mission in this world. So the Rebbe said, in your avodas Hashem, when you're serving Hashem, the things that are not challenging for you are things that have already been fixed up. There's already been a tikkun from previous generations, and that's not your challenge. That's not your work. Obviously, you have to keep those mitzvahs. You have to continue. But the very things that are the most challenging for you, the Rebbe says, the things that the Yetzer continues to test you with over and over again, is indicative of the fact that that is the tikkun of your soul in this world, and that is the work that you need to focus on. And the Rebbe said to this man who wrote in, and the fact that you're having so many problems with your Shalom Bayis, it's obvious that that is the tikkun of your soul that you have to fix. And that's where you have to put the most effort and the most energy, because that's where you're being tested by the most. In other words, your biggest challenges will reveal your greatest blessings. The things that are the hardest for you are obviously the things that you need to focus and work. All of us, right? Saying that this is what the Rebbe is saying. Anyways, very interesting answer. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. After Hashem gave the land of Israel to the Yidden, to Abraham and his offspring, Nasati, Lashon Avar, I gave, in other words, already happened. Kavar Nasati, I'm already gave, this is done. Yerusha, Hi Lechem Avosenu, this is an inheritance to you from your forefathers. And that furthermore we see it's connected to Eretz Yisrael when it says that שאברהם קיום אס קיום מתחילסך בארץ לרחבה. כאן אס ארץ ישראל זרע ערלו. That this land that was given to the Jewish people, it is a land l'rachava, of width and depth. In other words, the entire land was given to the Jewish people. And of course, we learn in Parshas Bereshis when Rashi said that the nations of the world will claim at some point in time that we are thieves, that we stole the land of Israel. And from the very beginning, we know that is the furthest thing from the case, that God gave us the land of Israel in its entire capacity. How much more so the fact that the Jewish people have already conquered in actuality the land of Israel in the first place, and then conquered it again. It was conquered by Yeshua, and it was conquered again by Ezra. Not that we need to conquer it to take ownership of it, because it was given to us. But anyways, Mahi Shamashma Oisai Akashoyas the Fual. Shall Hasipor, but Parshas Shell Yetziaso, shall Avram Me'artzecha, Bahalichase, Eretz Rasharach, Shboro Bahanich Lo Eretz Israel. Elaim, the Choram, Aris, Aravasha, English Bayam, Yoisa Aid all at Spa. So what is this whole idea when we learn in the Parsha that Avraham Avinu went out from his birthplace and traveled to the land of Israel, the land I will show you, when it says that Hashem gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people. So what is this concept that he was traveling there when Hashem basically said to Avraham, I already gave it to the Jewish people. Okay. Hey, let's skip the brackets and continue on. So let's start explaining some stuff. That when Hashem gave the land of Israel to the Abraham in the covenant of the parts, he gave all 10 parts of the land to Abraham and to the Jewish people for eternity. What does that mean? Lo rak es sheva artzos, not just the 7 lands, as Hachiti, the other lands, and the Gamas Gimel artzos, but also the 3 lands of Hakenizi, that's Hakenizi v'et Kanmon. Rak shebigilui before lo nisenem eder sheva goyim v'shlosha. It was only revealed the 7 lands. In other words, God gave all 10 lands to the Jewish people, 10 parts of Eretz Israel, even though in revealing state only we see the 7. And we'll continue in a second. We'll explain what that means. Because in the future to come, we will have revealed these other 3 lands. In the days of King Moshiach. But Hashem gave everything immediately in one shot. So in other words, I don't want to get ahead of it because the Rebbe is going to explain it, and I often speak too soon because then what's coming up around the corner is the Rebbe speaking. So okay, so basically it's like this. The land of Israel is divided into 10 parts, biblical parts. So again, I don't want to go too deep into it, but I just want to touch on it briefly. So everything that applies in the general applies in the specific. It's a basic concept in Judaism. We speak about it a lot. But you have the klali and you have the prati. You have the general and you have the specific. You have Moshiach Klalit, which is general Mashiach, when Mashiach reveals himself and we all go to the land of Israel and we all return to the Beis Hamikdash. That'll be redemption for everyone. But that doesn't mean that you cannot individually live in a state of redemptive consciousness. That is called Mashiach Prati. And same thing in all of your actions. Everything you do affects not only you, but affects everybody because we're all connected. So the land of Israel also has multiple facets to it. So we have the physical land of Israel, and then we have the spiritual land of Israel, if you will. In other words, the land of Israel exists down here in the physical world, in the center of the world. But at the same time, we have land of Israel, Lamaila, above, in the center of the universe, in the spiritual worlds. Just like the Beis Hamikdash, it exists down here physically, it exists upstairs spiritually. And the same thing, each one of us. We exist down here physically, and we have a compilation of our souls that exist above spiritually. The idea is that everything aligns, and the spiritual and the physical become one. But, excuse me, the 10 lands represent the 10 sphirot, or divine attributes that exist within us, that are connected to the 10 sphirot that exist within us above, and the land of Israel above. They're divided into 3 intellectual and 7 emotive. 7 emotions and 3 intellect. The intellect we know is Chabad, Chokhmah, Bina, and Das, which is wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And the 7 emotions are Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. Could learn about this in any Kabbalistic or Hasidic source in more detail. But the idea is this is how God relates to each one of us on an individual basis. In other words, there's godly energy that surrounds the world, which is called Soviv Kolamim. There's godly energy that is within the world, called Mamayla Kolamim. The godly energy that is within the world is how it is contained by each individual aspect of creation, as well as us. The more our vessels open up, the more that we have greater capacity to receive godly energy, the more that godly energy manifests within us. So Israel represents these 10 levels. So the Rebbe explains that we've already conquered the 7, which is our emotions. But the remaining 3, which is our mind, which are our intellect, it's in the process of being conquered, but it will be fully conquered when Mashiach comes. Conquering means in this physical world war. It means literally taking ownership of the land. In a spiritual sense, it means consciousness. It means that when it is conquered, you have no foreign thoughts. Your Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination that whittles as a worm in your brain and tries to get you to do things that are opposite God, to do things that are selfish and self-centered, and focus more on individual self-pleasures, as opposed to a higher state of pleasure, a higher state of consciousness in serving God, that will be gone. So in other words, we have the ability to master emotions right now, that we can control how we feel. We can control anger. We can control joy. We can not allow our emotions to control us. We have the ability to use our brain. But our mind in and of itself is not have been completely conquered. That will happen when Mashiach comes, which is why right now the main work that's happening in the world for years and years and years, everything was about applying to emotions. Everything was about trying to get people to feel a certain way. Now everything is about thinking a certain way. If you look at the forces of evil at work in the world, it's all brainwashing right now. And it's always been, but it's been more focused on the emotions to try to get people overly excited. Now they're just focusing on fear, 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 drilling into your brain all the time. You have to be worried. You have to be afraid because the apocalypse is coming. The end of the world is coming. COVID's going to kill you. And if someone sneezes on you, you're going to die. The government's going to lock you down. They're taking away your rights. You just live in a state of fear. So the idea is to push that negative energy out of your brain and fill your brain with positivity. How do we do that? It says knowledge is power. So the more knowledge of God you have, the more Torah you learn, the stronger your mind gets, and the more you have the ability to push away negativity in your head. The Rambam says that your love of God, your appreciation of God, your awe of God is directly connected to your knowledge of God. So the more you know, and the same thing goes with Mashiach, the more you learn about Mashiach, the more you want Mashiach, the more you desire Mashiach, the more Mashiach becomes a forefront of your reality. The less you know about Mashiach, the less you learn about it. It's just something that's disconnected from you. So the idea is we have to kind of unprogram or flush our brains out with godly energy. Anyways, so these are the 10 lands that were promised to the Jewish people. You are what you eat. Yeah, absolutely. You're what you eat, you're what you study, you're what you read, you're what you put inside of it. Right? What we see with our eyes, this is Parsha Shoftim. There's 7 judges that sit at our gates. What are our gates? They're our eyes, our nose, our mouth, and our ears. We have to control what's going on around us. Okay, so let's continue now. In the 7 lands we say they're already conquered. And the final 3, which represent our mochin, or our intellect, will be revealed when Mashiach comes. Recall, as I move on from all this we can understand. Mekivan, Bizman Hazeh, Befil, Bizman Yeshua, Bizman Beis HaRishayin, Bizman Ezra, that even at the time of Yeshua, and even at the time of the first temple, or the time of Ezra, or Hezekiel, Rak B'Shiva Artzos, only the 7 lands have been conquered. Logim of Artzos, but not the final 3. Kini, Kenizi, V'Kadmoni. Mamila Chaser B'Shleimos HaKinyan, Shel Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, the land of Israel has not been completely conquered, because even though we have 7 lands, control of 7 lands, if you look at a pie, 70%, it's just in a majority, but it's not the whole thing. And the whole idea is until we have our brains back, until we have our minds fully, we're still in a state of galus. We're still in a state of exile. even if we have control over our emotions. Ka'ashem hadavar noigel Eretz Yisrael atzma, hein hu b'noigel Yehudim sheberetz Yisrael. Afila acher kivash haaretz adayin lo haya b'kol hazmanim mitzav shel kol yoshvei alai. Yisera mekach afila b'kol yoshvei alai kufa kilma mispar darigos muvan b'pashtu sha'af al pi shehalacha hari b'kol yoshvei elu pirushay kol b'nei Yisrael sheba isa hadar avol asi lavo kasher yakol yoshvei alai ben noisef le'eser hashvatim. That only until we have the final three lands, only then will we have completion. In other words, until we have complete control of the land of Israel, there will always be if you look at excuse my comparison, but it's the first thing that popped in my head. God forbid cancer. Someone has the disease. And a doctor is able to get 99% out of their body. If he doesn't get the root of everything, it can come back. If you conquer an entire city, but you leave one small group of rebels, whatever, you couldn't conquer them, you leave. There's still the potential that they're going to rise up and take it back. In other words, it has to be completely conquered. And again, this applies to the land of Israel in the physical world, as well as the upper spiritual worlds. And the land of Israel inside of us are 3 intellectual faculties and our 7 emotional faculties. We have to have full control. Vav. Fiza move on Kitsare in Parsha Seinu. We see this explained in our Parsha. Lech lecha ma'artzecha, go from your land. Over to the land I will show you. V'chein einin kinyan ha'artz, excuse me. Noigel lefol gam b'zman hazeh. That this concept, we see a lechakar, go out from your land to the land I will show you and take possession of this land. This is connected also in actuality. And this time, since that we still don't have in actuality control of the final 3 lands, Kini, Kenizi, Bekadmoni, the Geula, which we will have in the true and complete redemption, Adayin Chazim Bayatsuyma, all Kinyan Eretz. We're still holding in the middle of the process of taking ownership or possession of the land. And therefore, we still have this concept of Lech Lecha, to go out from where you're holding, to go out and fully conquer. And this applies to every single Jew in every single place. And even in outside the land of Israel. To go to the land I will show you. That we must take ownership and possession of the entire land of Israel in a complete way in all 10 lands. When you see what's going on, I mean, you have to be a blind moron not to look at what's going on in Israel and see that the Jewish people have never once been aggressors. They want to live in peace, and they're constantly being attacked by nonstop rockets, bombs, suicide attacks for God knows how many years is going on. And what's happening is now the Jewish people, there's a whole big, everyone's going crazy. They're entering into the temple. Now, what do you mean? This is ours. It belongs to us. The forces of evil, the Klipa, which is originating from the maximum terrorists that are sitting on our neighbors, our wonderful cousins in Israel. What are they doing? They're trying to take this godly energy and suck it and then use it to support terrorism throughout the world. Iran, Syria, Lebanon, you could go on and on and on. These are terrorist nations. These are children that are raised and that are brought up in grade school to hate, to destroy, to murder, to kill. That is their entire education. Because they want to bring death and destruction to the world, just as we want to bring life and goodness to the world. And therefore, the whole idea is that we have to eradicate that negativity. And that negativity also exists inside of us. the part of us that has a self-destructive behavior, the part of us that the part of the Jews that are self-hating Jews, that wish they were goyim, that only want to act like goyim and dress like goyim and marry goyim and be like goyim. They have a voice of negativity, of self-hatred. And we all have that negative voice that comes in sometimes. It beats ourselves up. It tells us we're no good. That voice of destruction is a terrorist. That terrorist that is in our brain that is at times trying to get us depressed, trying to get us sad, trying to get us angry. We have to eradicate it. We have to take it out. We have to remove it. How do we do that? It's not a war with weapons. It's not a nuclear war. It's a war with light. We must fight darkness with light. Of course, we have to protect ourselves. In the land of Israel, we have no choice. If they attack us with weapons, we have to fight back with weapons. But the main work, the main job we have to do is remove negativity from within us. And the only way to do that is to add goodness, add light. We see one of the Rebbe's main campaigns in the latter years always was add in deeds of goodness and kindness. Add of deeds and goodness and kindness. Just keep doing more and more and more good. The more frustrated we get with the situation of what's going on in the world, the more it has to cause us to want to do more, to learn more Torah, to do more mitzvahs, to give more tzedakah, to help more people. That's how we fight. We don't take our rifles and go out in the street and attack people. We have the right to defend ourselves, but our work is with light, with positivity, with goodness. Yeah, okay. לא יקיים שיבוא לפיכך תשתוקקי בני ישראל God דורש כי יאמן כבר לך לארצך אז ארץ אשר רבה לקנינה של כל ארצות להוסיף שאין זה נוהג באופן מיוחד בדורנו זה בזמנו זה. The Rebbe says how much more so the concept of lechacha is applying now in our generation and in our times. As we have emphasized many times, especially recently, we're at the final end of times, the end of the ends. That we have already done tshuva, and we've already polished the buttons. In other words, there was a time that the Frierdiker Rebbe said, all we need to do is tshuva and Moshiach will come. And then there's a latter time where he said, even the Rebbe said that we've already done tshuva, we only have to polish the buttons and do the final steps. And now the Rebbe is telling us, we've already done tshuva and we've already polished the buttons. In other words, there's nothing lacking, there's nothing missing. The Fika, Siyamanim, Harish, Dorenu, and we see that we are in the times, the final times, we're in the last generation of the exile and the first generation of redemption. And we already completed everything incumbent upon itself. Before. And therefore, we are already prepared in actuality for Lech Lecha, Ma'artzecha, Asher Etzarecha, to the land I will show you. Techach B'yad Mamish. The Rebbe says it should happen immediately. Kano, as Israel, B'Shleimus, that we should have the full possession of Eretz Yisrael in a complete way. Call Esther Etzreis, all 10 lands. Shein Chalas, Ulam, Shabbat Israel. Yerusha, and this is an inheritance that was given to us and given to our forefathers through the covenant of parts that God made with Abraham. And the Rebbe says, and the unique thing about this is that we are now prepared to receive the final 3 lands. Noam means pleasant, and shalom means peace. In a pleasant and a peaceful way, meaning we don't have to war. The term war, we use it, the Rebbe started Tzivat Hashem, the army of God for kids. We use the term war, not the way our enemies use the term war. It doesn't mean we take little kids and strap rifles on them and bombs and send them out to blow themselves up. No. War means that we have to have the same conviction in our mind. We have to have the same approach as our enemies do. As bad as our enemies want to destroy us, we have to have the same passion to want to destroy bad and bring good. In other words, we have to have that. It's a war. But it's not a physical war. It's a spiritual war. It's a war against negativity. It's a war against darkness. It's a war against those who are opposing God. But we have to do it in a calm way, the Rebbe says, in a peaceful way. How to do that, I don't know. Let me know. Since that we are already in the time of Yemot HaMashiach, we're literally already living in Yemot HaMashiach, in the days of Moshiach now. In other words, the Rebbe said many times, especially in these latter sichas, that we're already in the beginning stages of redemption. And therefore, the Rebbe said it's not necessary anymore to have war. And it's just very powerful. And everything the Rebbe says is emes. Torah emes, Moshe emes. The Rebbe is the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation. There's not a word that comes out of his mouth that is not 100% directly channeling from God. That is not complete truth. And the Rebbe says now there's no more need for war. In fact, the nations of the world will give the remaining lands to us on their own free will, in a way of goodness. That's the fact, Jack. We just have to figure out there's obviously a gap here. There's obviously, in other words, the Rebbe is going to wake us up. He's going to pull us out of our bed. He's going to throw water on our face. He's going to open the door. He's going to say, you're free. Redemption's here. Go through the door. But he's not going to take us and push us through the door. So in other words, there's still a gap here that for some peculiar reason, no one has seemed to be able to figure out what it is and what exactly we need to do. I mean, the Rebbe says what to do. Learn about Mashiach and Geula, especially these teachings. So Dov, you're a witness. We've been learning. I think you're on your third year together with me. I've been learning these sichos now for 14 years. It's very challenging. I was just talking this over Shabbos with bringing about this. They're not easy sichos. I mean, it's clear. There's a lot of depth here. But to sit, I mean, we used to spend 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I lowered it to 3 hours to 2.5 hours. Now I do my best, and we've been pretty good at finishing up in 2 hours. Right? How many people are in a mindset to sit down and go deep into a sikha for 2 hours? So, okay, so we can give a sikkum. We could give a fourth year. Wow, we can give a modified, a short version, but it's not the same thing. It doesn't have the oomph. But I guess, as I had a Shabbos guest, the Shabbos, and he said, listen, start giving people little bits and pieces, make it exciting, make it enjoyable, and then bring them afterwards, those who are interested, to the deeper stuff. So perhaps that's the challenge. We have to find a way to take bite-sized teachings and bring it into people's capacity. Okay. Zion. Nevertheless, we still must explain what this concept is of Lech Lecha and how it is a preparation for receiving the Torah. Since the completion of the giving of the Torah will take place in the true and complete redemption, then we will have the revealing of the new Torah that will come out from me. Torah Chadash Mitzi Teitz. And then we will have the completion of the Torah. That will take place in the future to come. And therefore, we must say that the preparation for Lech Lecha of receiving the Torah is not only for the Torah we received on Har Sinai, but the Torah Chadash Miti Teitzi, the new Torah that will come out from Hashem, and the completion of that which will take place in Yemot HaMashiach, in the redemption. Zayt Emerit is to say, Hakanash Lech Lecha ben Nagash or Rakna in Matan Torah Asher Yishna Bakal Yoin Dargas Nagul Zayt Shalakim the Koyim, the Yom HaKoyim. The Lech Lecha is connected not only to the concept of giving the Torah that was given and that is given every single day in a higher level, more there, like we said above, but also and mainly, It is a preparation for the new Torah that we will receive in the future to come. And then we will have a complete new comprehension of the Torah that never existed before. So the Rebbe is kind of closing up the circle, if you will, and telling us that the preparation for receiving the Torah was not only the Torah that we got, that the Jewish people got in Har Sinai, but also the Torah that keeps getting renewed every year, but more importantly, a preparation for the ultimate new or renewed Torah that will come with Mashiach. Ches. The connection to the possession of the 10 lands of Israel with the giving of the Torah, this is connected and prefaced with the understanding of this concept of Lech Lecha, which is a preparation for the service of getting the Torah. We know that what happened when we received the Torah is that we got the, excuse me while I get a little lump fix here. What the Torah did is it brought together the upper worlds and the lower worlds that used to be separated. Now it allowed them to fuse together, so Gashmias and Ruchnias, physical and spiritual, can become one. That the level of godliness that is completely above, meaning spiritually too high to enter into this world, shall draw down and enter into the lowest part of the world. And then the physical creations down here in this physical world can become one with the upper spiritual worlds. And this, how is this done? Through fulfilling the mitzvahs, especially physical mitzvahs. Because something physical, like tefillin, for example, is taking spirituality, it's godly energy in the Shema, and it's attached to a physical thing. It's physical cloth. It's leather from the skin of an animal. It's writing from the ink from plants, and it's connected to us. Where did I go? Oh, here it is. To literally transform physical objects and make them holy. Because the ultimate goal is to build a dwelling place for Hashem below. A dwelling place for Hashem in all his being. Blessed be he. Oh. And the beginning of this process of transforming physicality into spirituality started with Abraham when he did Lech Lecha. And ultimately, when he fulfilled the mitzvah of Milah through the bris. Also, prior to the commandment of Lech Lecha, going out from your land, Abraham es avodasai va'artzai. And he went out from his father's home, and into a higher state of consciousness. And he went out from serving a place of serving idols to a place of serving God. And he occupied himself with spreading the knowledge of God across the world. In a way of complete self-sacrifice. As the Rambam explains at length, another name for Avram. Avram was given the name, it's brought down, Eitan. Eitan means strength. What was his strength? That he had a shotet bedato. He was able to control his das, his knowledge, and go in the way of truth. Avram literally took on the world. It was like really the entire world in Avram Avinu. The whole entire world was worshiping idols. The whole entire world did not acknowledge there was a God. And Avram Avinu stood up and made it his business to go around the world and educate every single person that there is a God. In addition to the name that was given to him, Eitan, which means strength, as we said, which stands for strength and power. And he had to have the power to literally go against the world. It's crazy. It's not an exaggeration. Literally, one man versus the entire world. And Avram won. I mean, not all at once, but he started convincing the world there was a God. Because lo yitpal lehem. Abraham al okoymai. Until Avram actually affected his place. He had a direct influence on his place. People started going around and blessing Hashem. You don't want to bless Hashem? Fine. Pay me. We're in the middle of the desert. You owe me 50 kopecks, 100 coins, whatever it is. You just ate my food. He was in the land of Haran, which is Lashon Haron, which is anger, which is a place of people that were the complete opposite of God, and he got them to call in the name of God. He went out of his father's house, a house where he was worshiping idols. לא מסופר בכל בתורה אפילו מה שכבר כן מסופר נעשה בקיצור נמרץ. הסביר לכך כמבואר בכמה מקומות. עשה עבודתו באופן כזה שהוא והעולם סביבה והשתי מציאותי נפרדות. עבודת נעשה מאחד בשני אופנים. אז הידי נסות מעל העולם, אז בעצם העניינים בכל פועל בעולם, זה בעצם, okay, fine. Basically, that the world was in a state of worshiping idols. There was no comprehension of the godly worlds above or God above. They were living in the physical world below. And Abraham is the one who began breaking that separation and preparing it for the Torah, where everything would become one, upper and lower. Through the commandment of Abraham going out, as Hashem sent him to do, he released and went out from all the boundaries and all the limitations of his servants, of the ordinary service up to that way in time. In other words, he became like a Superman in a Havdil. And he leaped, he like completely went out from where he was to a whole new state of reality, a whole new state of consciousness. Including also the service of how he affected the world, which was in a state of boundaries and limitations of holiness. He beto gam as a medida hagbala as mitzicha v'gazera. Beno yon metachtin lahol habira shala yon metachtain oiras is as sivan kodesh baruch v'tzamach zikar ledecha v'esavich. That this concept of lech lecha, that Abraham again began the beginning process of preparing the world for receiving the Torah and the Jewish people for receiving the Torah. How? By breaking through the boundaries that were separating the lower world from God and bringing a state of godly awareness or godly consciousness to the world that didn't exist previous. That was the preparation for receiving the Torah. And where does it say? It says, go to the land, I will show you. And what will I show you? Ara v'agala oisecha ba'atzmecha. I will show and reveal it to you, your essence. In other words, I will show you who you are. You can't, if there's one thing you could garner, that you could take home from this whole class tonight, that it is not possible to be your true self, to fulfill your true purpose, to do what you got put in this world to do, to be in a state of peace and oneness with you and your true identity without God. God created us. God continues to create us. And therefore, God knows who we are. And God knows why we're here, because he put us here. And he put us here for a specific purpose. And therefore, it's not possible, no matter how many times you change your job, your house, your car, your wife, your girlfriend, whatever it is, searching for peace, you can't do it without God. I know, I tried. I tried for 32 years of my life. I tried every possible combination of every possible thing there was. Doesn't work. Only when you find God, when you connect to God. But you have the ability to connect to your true essence. And if you can't connect to your true essence, you will be incomplete. And if you're incomplete, you can't have peace. Because without shalom, without completion, there'll be no shalom, there'll be no peace. Izgala be'eretz hatakton emisis metziyaisei etzmuso mechusei. To the land, to the true land, where you will see your true essence and your true being of who you really are. Booyaka! Okay, Tess. Oh, it's getting late. That's right. We're on time. I think so. Maybe a little high. All right. And this is the unique thing that we're going to learn out from going out from your land and your birthplace. El Asheret all ha'aretz asher arecha, to the land I will show you. Abraham lo histafech ha'avodasei b'meshech sheve'im shana v'chamesh shana agadumus. That Abraham did not stop in his service. This is very powerful right now, right here. So if you're dozing off, wake back up. Give yourself a little smack on the face. Abraham did not quit his service for the continuation of 75 years. Shana Hakdamas, before before he got to the next stage, the next level. One second. I'm making a note here. Who are you? Who are you? All right, don't need me singing the who are you? Okay. Hashem commanded him to go out from his place and his ordinary work, his ordinary capacity where he was holding, to go out on the way. Halicha amitis perusha. Halicha shaloi be'erach. to go to a place that you've never been before in a new way. That is in a place completely removed from where you were before. A new place of holiness. Above boundaries and limitations. Amazing. Why is this amazing? You know when Avram did Lech Lecha? For 75 years old. When he was a kid, you know the famous story, he used to smash his father's idols. His father was an idol worshiper. And his father came in one time and saw all the idols smashed and broken into pieces on the floor. And his father screamed and went nuts on Avram. What are you doing? He said, I didn't do it. Well, they said, well, who did it? Said, it was him. And he left one idol. And he told his father that that's the idol that smashed all the other idols. His father looked at him and said, what do you think, I'm a moron? He was a great warrior, Terach. Avram said, well, what do you mean? If you believe that these idols have the power to bring goodness and blessings to you, then surely they're strong enough to destroy other idols. In other words, he made him look like a fool. Anyways, Avram's whole life, he worked and worked and worked and worked to reveal God in a world around him that concealed him. It wasn't until he's 75 years old that Hashem said, now you're ready. Now you're ready, dinosaur. Show me paint fits. Show me wax car. He said, in other words, these were all preparations. Sometimes we get frustrated. We get frustrated. We just feel like we're grinding it out and grinding it out and grinding it out, and nothing's changing. We're looking at Hashem. We're like, where's that energy? Where's that power that you gave me when I did tshuva? Where's that light? Where's that excitement? My life is a grind now. Hashem said, okay, that's part of your work. Keep grinding it out. In other words, when you're ready, you will be led to the next stage in your journey. However long it takes. Like the Alter Rebbe said, even if I were to chop wood every day for the rest of my life, all I want is you, God. The problem is when we give up. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says this is the definition of Golus. Golus is when you stop searching for God. When you basically say, okay, he was there in my life before, but now he forgot about me. He doesn't care. He wants me to be bored. He wants my life to suck. He wants me to just sit here and be miserable. Okay, I'll be miserable. You're done. Cooked. Put a fork in. We have to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. It's like you're digging for a hidden treasure. It's there. Can't stop. Can't stop. God will open up your consciousness 100%. He will bring you to heightened states of reality. He will help improve your life, but you can't give up. And you keep digging and digging and digging. 75 years he toiled before God said, now you're ready for the next stage. Okay. Mishneh Kavan, and there was two intentions. Haim Lamata Lamaila. One is from below to above. Me'eretz Haran hu Allah al Eretz Hasharach. To go from the land of Haran to the land I will show you, Eretz Yisrael. Arecha bepirushai oisecha ba'atzmacha. Arecha, I will show you. What does it mean? I will show you your true being, your true essence. I will show you who you are. Haim Lamaila Lamat. And the second is from above to below. And this is the beginning in order to do the service of unifying upper and lowers. To draw down the godly energy from the upper worlds into the lower worlds. The lower, and there's nothing lower than it. In such a way that is not compared at all to where it was before. And therefore, afterwards, Hashem switched up Avram's name and he busted him out into Abraham. Yep. Dropped another letter in there. Ki Av Haman Goyim B'Techa. He became the father of the nations. Before he was only Avram, and the Hay was Av El the Adam, the Aran. He was only the father of Aram. And now he became the father of the entire world. Again, there's a lot of depth to what the Rebbe is saying here. A Jew is a majority. It doesn't matter in number. When a Jew acts like a Jew, when a Jew is relentless in our pursuit of God and relentless in our pursuit of bringing others to God, it could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people can't stop us. The entire world, we will become the product, the givers of light, and they want it. Okay. היינו שהתחייסת את להליכה בעבודת העולם, בכך הוא פועל את הבירור, אלא שכל העולם, because then he went on from rectifying or refining his Dal de Amos to the entire world. And then he became Av Haman Goyim, the father amongst the multitude of the nations, Baal Habayit Aleim, and the ruler, the Baal Habayit upon them. Even more, he became Eitan. He was strong. Mata. In such a way that he was able to refine the lower worlds more and more and more. And therefore he was able to travel higher and higher and higher. Arecha. He was able to travel. In other words, there's just so much depth here. There's so much beauty to bring on here. The more Abraham went out into the world, the more he conquered the world, the more he brought godly energy into the world, the deeper he went into himself, and the deeper he revealed his true essence. And the true essence of every Jew is what? It's our godly soul. So in other words, the more we fight to bring godly energy into the world, the deeper we go into our true essence, and the more we reveal the godly nature in us, and the more the nations of the world become in awe of us. And the opposite is true. The more we act like Goyim, the more we pretend we're not Jews, the more we want to fit in with the nations of the world, our godly soul gets more and more suppressed. And guess what? They suppress us. And ultimately, the goal is that the upper and the lower worlds will become one. And that became complete in the giving of the Torah. Okay, let's start jamming so we can finish on on-time landing. ויש למשה זהו גם בהבירה במה הפירשה סלח לך היא הפרש והשלמוס התורה וכן בתכן שלח לך הוא הכרה בתחילה של המהדור הקשור עם הקו השלישי מאחורי העליון והתחתונים. Torah brought forth the third column, the third line, which unifies the upper and lower, the other two. Teichen shal parshas Bereshis, haparsha harishayna, hu edis birias ha'elam shnivra ayidei hakadosh baruch hu yonim teichna shal parshas Noach, parsha sheni. And just like the giving of the Torah brought the third line, it's also Parshas Lech Lecha, which is the third parsha, following up from Bereshis and Noach. In other words, this is the parsha that connects everything. It's connected with refining the lower worlds. Parshas Lech Lecha, Parshas Hashlishi, because the first parsha, Bereshis, we learned earlier, is God sending his energy into the world. And the second parsha is Noah, is us doing our work in this world and elevating the energy above. And Parshas Lech Lecha is the fusion together of the upper and lower worlds. We are the world. We are the children. Feeling very musical this evening. All right, let's continue. Yud. The unification of the upper and lower worlds of Lech Lecha, Boili de Betoy Begilei Pashtus, Akiyam Mitzvahs Mila Shabbat Avim. This was expressed in a revealed way through the mitzvah of Mila. K'medubar pa'amim b'rabos hakach sheyesh Yisrael l'kiyum ha'mitzvahs la'achri ma'an Torah. Yehudi v'kaveh HaKadosh Baruch Hu ha'davar megashmi mehem ha'kiyam ha'mitzvah. V'koach hazeh mahatz mitzvahs shekirei ma'avos b'fnei ma'an Torah. We know that their forefathers kept the entire Torah even before it was given. And this all started with the mitzvah of Mila of Avram Avinu. It was a physical mitzvah that was literally, you can't get much more physical than putting a covenant in your physical body. That the mitzvah of Mila is an example of a foretaste of what the mitzvahs will be like after the Torah was given. The and therefore we see the connection with all the other mitzvahs of the avos. Our forefathers kept all the mitzvahs even before they were given. And therefore it says that the deeds of the forefathers are a sign of the children. They began the whole process. Was specifically to the very first mitzvah that was given to Abraham of making a covenant in his flesh. It literally opened up the pathway and the gate for all the other mitzvahs that would be given after when the Torah was given. Nevertheless, this mitzvah had something unique regarding all the other mitzvahs. Because this was a mitzvah literally done within the physical flesh. You can't get much more physical than that, right? It's not even our ear, it's our member. Members only. I like to entertain myself sometimes. Okay, and this is a covenant in the flesh, in the member. And the member, we know, is connected to, especially the member is connected to the sphere of Yesod, and the crown, the corona of the member is connected to Malchus. It's the lowest. And that's where the covenant was made. To show that the lowest will be a vessel for the highest godliness. Guys said, okay, in addition to this, today, the Chalish es one of the ideas, if you will, the fact that why God chose the member to be the place of mitzvah milah and not the ear or the nose or something else like that, is in order to weaken the physicality, the coarseness of the member. In other words, I'm not privy to this because I've always had a bris, Baruch Hashem, since I was 8 days old. But from what they say, that a man who's uncircumcised experiences greater levels of pleasure when he's having sexual relations. Don't ask me how that works biologically or anatomically. I don't know, but that's what they say. And so the whole idea is that the reason that God made sexual relations pleasurable is to entice a man to want to have relations with his wife. Because when a husband and a wife, according to Jewish law, have relations at the right time, in the right situation, with the right mindset, it's the closest they get to God. Because man and woman, Adam and Chava, were one, and they got split in two. And the closest you can get to coming back to one again is when you unite together physically. And what's really happening is you're channeling a higher level of divine energy and becoming a chariot for God. And of course, to procreate and bring children into the world. The problem is, okay, that's like very good. Thank you, Dove. I feel like we're going back into sex education class. Anyways, so the idea is that, but yeah, perhaps you're right. The idea is that when the covering of the phallus, the foreskin remains on, it brings sexual sensual pleasure to man, and that is the complete opposite. The complete opposite of God's intention. When we start having fortuitous sex, when people are just seeking self-pleasure, that's not the idea. That's not why we're here. So by making the milah, by separating that, it's literally the covenant of saying to God, I'm not here for my own pleasure. I'm not here for my own joy or my own arousal. I'm here to give pleasure to not just my wife, but in a deeper and a higher sense to God. Because sexual relations are one way of doing that. Another way of doing that is bringing your divine energy, your power, into the world and using your abilities to influence the world for good, instead of taking your abilities and using them just to become rich or powerful or successful, whatever the case is. So there's a lot of depth going on, but the whole idea is that we should transform something that has the potential for self-gratification or self-pleasure into something that gives or provides goodness and joy and pleasure to the world, namely to Hashem, by spreading godly energy in the world. And therefore this mitzvah is not only about turning away from evil. I don't know if these comments, I don't think they stay on YouTube afterwards. I was going to say, it's like anyone who's not listening to the shir and then they just see the comment, perhaps like a clearness, they're going to be like, what the hell are these guys learning? But I don't think the comments show up. Anyway, so it's not only a matter of Stromer Rav, turning away from evil, and the mitzvahs but rather that this mitzvah shall transform and turn the member, the physical coarse member, into something that is an object of holiness. And not only that, it's a covenant with God in the world. An eternal covenant. And this is something that is revealed to all the nations of the world. They know the Jewish people are special people. We have a special bond with Hashem because it's a club for members only. Okay. I think I do the same jokes every year when we get to this. When we get to the sikha, I can't help myself. Okay, and through the mitzvah of Milah, God changed Avram's name to Abraham, because then he became really the father of all the nations. And this was the mitzvah milah, to give the power to rectify the nations of the world. In other words, the reason a Jew is able to literally become a majority and take on massive amounts of those opposing him is not from his power. It's not because we're smarter or we have a higher IQ. It's because of the godly power within us. And when we channel that godly power, obviously nothing could stand in our way. Including the physical and coarseness of the world. Down to the lowest and physical aspects of this world, that there's nothing lower. To shine the light of God in the low worlds. And this is the power to literally bring this into actuality. And then Hashem will rule over the entire world in the true and complete redemption. Yud Aleph. Visa, Ashragam Nahavines, Ashaychas Ben Hibor, Yonim Tachtonim and Torah. And according to this, we could understand the relevance to Abraham's journey of Lech Lecha and its mitzvah, as it's a preparation to unify the upper and lower worlds, which subsequently took place in the giving of the Torah. After Abraham did Lech Lecha, Hashem gave the land of Israel to Abraham and his offspring for eternity. ניתן את ארץ ישראל לאברהם אבינו היא כדי לאברהם זרע אחריו הפכו והקישור את הארץ הגשמיס ושמו ממנו ארץ ישראל תראה יספרח ותחתן. And so we see that God's basically said to Abraham and his offspring, I'm giving this land to you forever. In other words, now that this land that is filled with idolatry, filled with people who only care about themselves and their self-pleasure and their selfish desires, you now, because you have given yourself to me, you've made a covenant in your member, and now you've transformed that into something of self-pleasure, into something of connecting to God. Now you have the power and the ability to transform a world that is selfish into a world that's a proper receptacle for godliness. ביקש ארץ ישראל על ידי ישראל הבורס בו בעל ידי ביטוי הבורס שלמה של חיבור עליונים ותחתונים ענייני של מתן תורה שבדברי מעלס את הארץ הלזית התחתונים הגשמי שחיים בישראל שם זה דירה להשם ולכן שלמה זה קיום המצווה שנהם תורה היא דווקא בארץ ישראל. And therefore the land of Israel became transformed into a holy place, a place fitting for God. And therefore the ultimate completion where we'll be able to do all the mitzvahs is specifically in Eretz Yisrael. Pizah move on, Shinitin as Eretz Yisrael, Papir, so the Zerah Oilam, Yitarakorf, the Shlemus Kiyam mitzvahs. Asir Ma'asyois, Achre Ma'antur, Shem Bo as Birovizacha, Barabi Magashmin. And then we see the ultimate completion when we receive the Torah. And we got all the Torah, all the mitzvahs, and the ability to transform the physical world, especially Eretz Yisrael, into a place of godliness. And this is where we see this concept of go to the land I will show you. And therefore, we see that Abraham traveled to the land of Israel, and the land of Israel was given to Abraham. They're one thing that continued in one continuation. And again, we saw the completion of the unification, of the rectification of the lower worlds, with the oneness of the upper worlds when we receive the Torah. Yud Beis. And according to what we have just learned out above, we can see the connection of Parshas Lech Lecha as a preparation for the giving of the Torah. ועד הליכה שלוי בערך, כלול גם לעניין של מתן תורה, מובן גם כך שתמיד יש צריך לכך, הקרוב את המגיב למתן תורה. הלחץ כמה וכמה כשדובר הגילי הנעלה ושאלה וערך שלו הרב וגול המצווה שלו. And we will see that this will be at a much higher level even still when Mashiach comes. Eretz Yisrael, Makana Melacha B'Ma'an Torah, B'Zman Tuli Hashlimos D'Ma'an Torah. That the land of Israel will be fully conquered, and therefore will have the completion of the giving of the Torah. And what was missing, even though we were given the entire land, it still hasn't been revealed. It will all be revealed. And this will specifically come about through the completion of Go, Lech Lecha. Eretz Eretz Israel beheshlemus. As the hashlemus came out of mitzvahs. It's interesting. Let me just finish this paragraph, and I don't want to. Well, I'm going to do our best to finish on time. We started a few minutes late, but we'll try to finish it up on time. Okay. Just before I forget, so there's one point. So it's interesting because last week we learned how the Rebbe emphasized the importance of doing tshuva, and that how, nevertheless, that all the work is done. We've done everything as a nation, but we are still, each one of us still needs to do tshuva. And then the Rebbe said, but yet everything's dependent upon Mashiach himself. And we see, we could at least suggest what the Rebbe is saying now is that, yes, everything is done. But every Jew that does Lech Lecha, every Jew that does tshuva is done, meaning in a general sense. But every Jew that takes our godly soul out of captivity and reveals it in a way of Abraham, in a way of Etain, in a way of strength, Eitan, this brings the redemption closer. Because all that divine energy that has been trapped is coming out and it's being revealed, and we're having the power to transform the world. And I think we could suggest that the Rebbe is also saying this is the work. Again, why we should be learning this sichos, because the Rebbe is teaching us everything we need to be doing. And the more work, the more neshamas we inspire and light up to do Lech Lecha, there's the tipping scale. At some point in time, everything will tip over. When? I don't know. So there's nothing that's stopping redemption from happening. And Mashiach himself is going to bring the final redemption. But it's from our power, our work of working on ourselves and inspiring those around us to do Lech Lecha. Nevertheless, we still find ourselves still before the redemption. In other words, the full redemption is not here. So open your eyes and look outside. How do you know you're about to fall? Therefore, it's necessary in actuality to do Lech Lecha from your land. To the land I will show you. Kinyan ha'aretz Yisrael b'shleim, which this kind of emphasizes what I just finished saying. Since redemption is not here, the Rebbe is saying you have to do Lech Lecha. In other words, you can't say that tshuva is stopping Mashiach from coming, but at the same time, we have to say, since Mashiach is not here, we must keep doing Lech Lecha. We must keep doing tshuva. Because then we'll be able to go to Eretz Yisrael and we'll be able to have the completion of the new Torah that will come out from me, and we'll be able to fulfill all the Torah mitzvahs. Yud Gimel. Now we're going to talk according to the Penimis, according to the Chassidus and the Kabbalah. The whole thing is Chassidus, but a deeper explanation. Mashma oisei b'Penimias that the conquering, this is what we said earlier on in the Sikha, the conquering of the 7 lands are connected to a service in rectifying the 7 emotional attributes, and ultimately to get the final 3 lands. And this is the server of the Mochim, Chokmah Bin and Das Chabad. That in this time we only have the 7 lands in a revealed way, because the main service in Olam Hazeh is the rectification of the midos, the emotions. That the main service of Chabad right now is to influence the emotional attributes. But in the future to come, the true completion of the three lands will take place, and then it will be avodah b'gimel hamochin gam avodah b'fnei atzmaim. We will then be having the work of our brain in and of itself. In other words, chochmah ila'ah, bina ila'ah, the mochin as they are in existence in the upper worlds, not as they are in existence to influence the lower worlds. And therefore we will have the unification of the Yidden together with Hashem, and the Torah will be revealed as one. And then it will be revealed that the Yidden and the Hashem and the Torah are truly one. From this we can understand the completion of the service. Specifically when we have ownership, if you will, or power over all 10 powers, all 10 soul powers. Says you should love Hashem with all of your heart, talking about the 7 emotions, but call nafshecha, and all your soul, referring to all 10 powers, which is a service completely above any boundaries or limitations. Including all 10 of our powers. And then we'll have the true serving of Hashem. Okay. And the giving of the land, of the whole land of Israel, is indicative of the fact of the completion of our service. The midas, and then in addition to revealing the mochin, the chokmah, bin, and das, as they relate to our emotional attributes, which was in the time of Matan Torah, we will also have the revealing of the 3 mochin, or the chokmah, bina, and das, in their essence. And that is this, the revealing of the 50th gate. Then we'll reach a level of divine consciousness that is not compared at all to the 49 gates. In other words, the 7 times 7, the 49, the rectification of the emotional attributes. And this will be the Torah Chadash Miti Taste, the new Torah that will come out for me, the true and complete redemption. We're finishing up. We'll be done in about 10 minutes. We're going over a couple minutes, but it's okay. And the entire occupation of the world will be to know God. And we'll also see, it says that the knowledge of God will cover the oceans. And the ocean, or the Yam, Yod Mem, is the same gematria of Nun, which is revealing of the 50th gate. Mayam Lashon Rabbi. Al Rishus Rabbi in the earth. That the knowledge of God will be like a Rishus Rabbi that will spread out to the entire world. Yudal Achas. The Paul Umhamarale. And according to what we said above. The every single Jew must find something unique and bring it out in the Torah. In other words, the Rebbe doesn't want us to be robots. He doesn't want it just to take in information and regurgitate it out. He wants us to find unique things and explain it in our own way. Like I came up with that whole thing of members only. I don't think the Rebbe thought of that. You ever heard the Rebbe talking about that? I don't think so. I think I need to capitalize on that. I think we should make a new line of members only jackets. It would be like a little, like a sign of like the circumcision or something. Let's see, members only. Okay, anyways. A feeling of the Torah, Bakama, Shikavar the Merah Tamir, Shayach Lahism Bezah, Avo Ifan Shachidush, Shachet Torah, Hina, Bligvu, a Rucha Merat Vida, or Abba Minayam. Yisera al Kain, Hayais, Torah, Hachmasha Yisra Hakadosh Baruch Hu. And we call it Yireh HaTorah, and Yisef Koch, Halei Oid Inyan Chadash Hamad Ein Seif. That the Torah is the knowledge of God. Members only kapatas. Ooh, you're onto something. Got to work on that one. They're made out of foreskins, and if you rub them, they turn into parachutes. Okay. The Torah is divine knowledge of God, and that each one of us has to keep learning more and more Torah, and that we have to find unique things all the time in the Torah. Okay. We must go beyond our ordinary. We have to reach a whole new level of service, including our ordinary concept of Kedusha. In other words, the Rebbe is saying every time we learn Torah, it has to renew us with new power to do Lech Lecha, not only in our service of God, but in our Torah learning. So in other words, every time you learn, you got to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's well springs. The Torah is infinite. The Rebbe says that our normal service, we reveal our powers, when we serve Hashem, when we do our divine service, we reveal the powers within us. But this is nothing, there's no big deal to reveal the powers that are within us. But what the Rebbe says, we have the ability to reveal our hidden powers. That those that are hidden within inside, that have the potential to be revealed. But this is still not a chiddush. In other words, everyone has, heard a whole life, you're not living up to your potential. Of course, we have powers inside of us that we're not truly revealing. But the Rebbe says that's not a chiddush. That's nothing out of the norm. We all have that. But the Rebbe says even more than that. The Rashi Chulu. The Rebbe says that if you do true Lech Lecha, we have the ability not only to reveal our concealed powers, but to tap into powers that we don't even know exist. So look at it like this. Like, here's where we're holding over here. And right below the surface, we have hidden powers. And the more we dig, the more become revealed. But then it's like we kind of have an idea of what our potential is that we're not living up to. But the Rebbe says deep below, there's powers, there's well springs inside of you you don't even know exist. And when you do true Lech Lecha, you could tap into those tremendous, tremendous powers that you are not even aware of within you. I'm going to skip this couple paragraphs so we can finish up. We're coming to the end. But the Rebbe said, how do you increase in your learning? You can do it two ways. You can learn more, and you can also learn deeper into what you're learning, so you can comprehend it even more. To find unique things in the Torah, the Rebbe says this. In other words, so the Rebbe is now telling us to do Lech Lecha, not only in your service of Hashem, not only to find your true identity and to connect to God, but in your Torah. Dig deeper inside of your Torah to reveal your powers inside of you, because we're one with the Torah, one with God. And then we will reveal all 10 soul powers within us. And that's the key to reveal all 10 lands of Israel. The call, the Reisha, but of Ayin Zeshel Yehudi, Ayde Shahu Moisiv, Halem Torah. And then we reveal the three mochin, not only as they're connected to the midos, and the gangum mochin be'etzem, but the three levels of mochin in their essence. And through this we'll add on to our learning in Penimis Torah, including the matters of redemption and Mashiach. That's the main focus we have to increase in our Torah learning. Tezvav, last letter. End things out with a bang. Maybe Hashem's will. Yidei hoispa ba'avoda delech lecha yiki yoimam teichaf miyad b'pashtus in lechacha ma'artzecha kevet nidchano ma'arba kanavot ha'aretz. To feel immediately in b'pashtus lech lecha that we will immediately go to our land. In other words, when we do lech lecha, we will do truly lech lecha. Where? To the land of Israel. The land I will show you in depth and breadth, with the final three lands will be revealed to us. And together with the Shleimus al-Kalish and all 10 powers of our soul, the 70 emotion attributes and the 3 intellectual attributes. And then we will have the new Torah that will be revealed to us. And then the entire knowledge of the world will be filled with God like the waters cover the ocean. Including the nations of the world. The entire occupation of the world will only be to know God. And Hashem will rule over the whole world. That all attributes of the world, inanimate plants and animals and human beings, everything will reveal godliness. How much more so a man who's the breath of life within that God breathed into us, and the entire world will be transformed into a dwelling place for God. Including the upper worlds of Bia and Atzilus. And that we will immediately do Lech Lecha, the Rebbe says, and that Hashem will be revealed upon us. And the true and complete redemption. And that all eyes will literally see our teacher, our master. The Shamas Bagufin, souls and bodies. And the entire world will reach its ultimate completion. And mainly, take of Miyad Mamish, it should happen right now. We should have the fullest godless of the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach. We should be blessed to do true Lech Lecha, to go out of any boundaries or limitations that you have, real or imaginary, to ultimately connect to the true essence of who you are. May your true soul powers be revealed. May Mashiach be revealed within you. And may Mashiach be revealed across the world. Mashiach now. See you in the Beis HaMikdash.